Order, order. We now come on to the next debate, and I call Abena Oppong-Asare to move the motion.
Sorry. We're waiting for the gallery.
Sorry? She's not here.
Oh, they're waiting for the public to come in.
I think we must proceed because obviously it's important. We've only got 1.5 hours maximum. We started at 6 o'clock, and so I think we must start. And obviously the members of the public will be able to come in, okay?
Yeah.
If they want to, okay?
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Sir Roger Gale. I beg to move that the House has considered e-petition 578416 relating to support for black victims of domestic abuse. Can I begin by thanking the Petitions Committee and its chair, the Honourable Member for Newcastle upon Tyne North, for allowing me to move the motion today, despite not being a member of the Petitions Committee. The petition we are considering is entitled Valerie's Law, Compulsory Training for Agencies Supporting Black Domestic Violence Victims. It calls on the government to make specialist training mandatory for all police and other government agencies that support black women and girls affected by domestic abuse. Police and agencies should have culturally appropriate training to better understand the cultural needs of black women affected by domestic abuse. I'd like to begin by thanking the organisers of this petition, the specialist domestic violence organisation, Sistah Space, and the 106,519 people who signed the petition, including 339 in my own constituency. Sistah Space work with black women and girls who have experienced domestic or sexual abuse or who have lost a family member to domestic violence. Their mission is to encourage black survivors to report abuse by providing safe cultural venue for victims to disclose abuse in a confidential environment and to encourage community integration. They also provide advice and support as well as practical help by providing hygiene and other essential items to women and girls who need them. I'm very pleased that some members of Sistah Space have joined us in the public gallery today, and I thank them for helping me prepare for this debate. The petition is about the support that black women and girls can and should expect from the police and other agencies that are supposed to help them when they experience domestic abuse. It's about the failures we too often see from the police and others in this regard. And it's about how we can make things better. Before coming to the substance of the petition and the campaign for Valerie's Law, I want to speak a little about the context in which why we are debating this issue. In the last few months, we have had the revelations that a 15-year-old black girl was taken out of exam and strip searched in her school by police officers on the basis that she smelled of cannabis. No drugs were found. We've had the shocking report into institutional racism and misogyny at Charing Cross Police Station, where male officers joked about beating their girlfriends and raping women. And we've had 2 Metropolitan Police officers imprisoned for taking dehumanising photos at the murder scene of 2 black women, Nicole Smallman and Bibia Henry. The trust that black people, and perhaps especially black women, have in the police has been repeatedly damaged in recent months. It is perhaps at the lowest point in decades. The police, and indeed the government, must recognise this and acknowledge this and set out how they intend to repair this. Because even before we get to specialist training, we need to have basic confidence that the police will treat black women with respect.
On that point, my honourable friend give way.
I'd be delighted to give way to my honourable friend.
Can I just thank my honourable friend? Thank you. She is making an excellent start to her speech. And she touched on a point there about building trust and confidence in the police. And for us to really make any headway in ensuring that the excellent campaigning and the tools and resources that Sistah Space have developed in order to educate people on the cultural differences that Black, African and Caribbean women make, the government and the police force also need to recognise the role of institutional racism for it to enable it to really take root and start to make a difference to the lives of Black women.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend, Bassey, for making this point. I completely support the points you raised. Particularly in the last few months, it's become even more apparent as to why we need this training. So I'll be delighted to give my honourable friend way.
Thank you. Before I make my intervention, can I also thank Sistah Space for all the work that they've done, and also mention that my neighbour from Brent Central would definitely be in this debate, but as most of people have seen, she's recovering from breast cancer, and I just wanted to say that she would definitely be in this debate, voicing her support if she were here, but I felt as her neighbour I should say something. 628 people from Hampstead and Kilburn signed the petition that we're debating today, and sadly that doesn't surprise me, because I've heard from women in my constituency, particularly Black women, over and over again how scandal after scandal has seriously undermined their confidence in London Met Police. And I wanted to ask my honourable friend, who is making an excellent start to her debate, does she agree, and she's referenced this recent event in our capital, the disturbing report of racism, sexism at Charing Cross Police, it's contributed to a breakdown of trust, and that specialist domestic violence training for the police would be an important first step, not the only step, but the important first step in rebuilding trust between Black women and Metropolitan Police?
Thank you. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for the intervention, but also I want to take the opportunity to congratulate her on the work that she's done to help bring Nazim Ratcliffe into this country. I think that what my honourable friend has said has been completely important. It's very much what Sistah Space have been trying to put forward. The fact that so many people across the country have signed these petitions, and the fact that there is low trust within the police at the moment, shows that now is the time for the government to really put forward some sort of training like this, because this would help regain the trust of many people, particularly Black women victims of domestic abuse. I now turn to Valerie law itself. In March 2014, Valerie Ford and her one-year-old daughter, Josiah, were murdered by her ex-partner. He attacked Valerie with a machete and hammer and slit Josiah's throat. 6 weeks earlier, he had threatened to burn down the house with everybody inside. This was recorded by the police as a threat to property rather than a threat to life. The IPCC, as it was then, strongly criticised the Met's failure, finding that officers' inaction left Valerie alone with the man who killed her. In Valerie's case, and many others, there are real concerns that police officers and other agencies have significant knowledge gap when it comes to the Black community and Black victims of domestic abuse. I would like to take this moment to thank Valerie's daughter for joining us in the public gallery today, and to thank her for allowing me to share her mother's story, because we cannot allow any more stories like this to happen again. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to just say to colleagues to be mindful of what you do say in this debate. Data from Agenda, the Alliance for Women and Girls at Risk, show that Black women experiencing domestic abuse are less likely to be referred for specialist support by police. They also found that Black women supported by Refuge were 3% more likely to have experienced physical abuse and 4% more likely to have experienced sexual abuse than white survivors of abuse. This suggests that Black women are more likely to reach Refuge services when they're experiencing the most visible and extreme forms of abuse, and may not be taken seriously when reporting more hidden and insidious forms of abuse, such as physical, psychology and financial abuse. As Agenda says, barriers to disclosing or reporting abuse for Black and minority groups is rarely given sustained attention in policy making. As Sistah Space say, without basic understanding of the experience of Black women, it is impossible for police officers and service providers to ensure Black women are equally protected. Valerie's law is simple. It would introduce mandatory specialist training for all the agencies that help victims of domestic abuse. It will enable police officers, relevant government agencies and domestic violence organisation staff to acknowledge and protect black women in abusive situations through a better understanding of the specific threats and challenges they face. To give a few practical examples, generally bruises on black skin do not show the same way as on white skin. That means the crucial physical signs of violence can be missed or overlooked. Agenda have raised the issue of adultification, where black girls are viewed as older than their age, with professionals assuming that they have greater levels of maturity and less innocence than their white peers. As well as informing more punitive responses to black girls and young women, this may reduce professional sense of their safeguarding responsibilities, with practitioners highlighting the way in which stereotyping black young women as particularly resilient can be a barrier to assessing timely support. It's for these reasons that questions used to determine the level of risk should reflect the experience of black women and girls to better understand the danger they are facing. I should make it clear that Sistah Space are already delivering training to a variety of agencies, including local authorities. I welcome organisations and agencies that are taking the initiative right now to train their staff in this way, but it's clear that the government needs to take action to ensure that the training is provided across the board. Unfortunately, the government's response to the petition states that they do not think it is necessary to mandate training on the specific needs of victims due to their ethnicity. I really hope the government will reconsider the position during today's debate. Only by having this training made mandatory, whether in law or guidance, can there be accountability and assurances agencies are providing it. Be delighted to give way to my honourable friend.
My honourable friend is making a customarily excellent speech on a really important issue. I gave evidence to the Macpherson inquiry over 20 years ago now, and a number of the recommendations in the Macpherson inquiry were about training of police around a variety of issues. This is an issue that wasn't picked up by Macpherson, but a range of issues, including domestic violence, where the police aren't dealing with black and minority ethnic communities in the same way as white communities and white victims of crime. And don't we need actually a broad look at all of these issues and mandatory training in all of these areas, including domestic abuse?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his contributions, which I completely agree. 20 years ago, the Macpherson inquiry. Where are we now? Why is there no training being implemented to address these issues to support victims of domestic abuse? There is no reason as to why it should not be implemented right now. Sistah Space have made it clear that their willingness to work with the government and other domestic abuse organisations and with relevant bodies such as the Royal College of Policing to develop a package of training that could be incorporated within existing training for domestic abuse. This will be a relatively straightforward way of ensuring that this important training is delivered in a wide range of police forces and agencies. But it really does require the government to support it to make it happen. I say to the Minister, if she cannot commit to this in full, I hope she will commit to working with Sistah Space and other organisations to see what progress can be made. I also note in the government's response to the petition, they say to accompany the Domestic Abuse Act, we will shortly publish statutory guidance for consultation that will provide further detail on how specific types of abuse can be experienced by different communities and groups, including ethnic minority victims. Could the Minister give us more details about this? It sounds as if this could be a positive step towards ensuring that agencies provide support to all victims of domestic abuse, including black women. But it's crucial that the government works with specialist organisations to ensure that this guidance is rooted in the reality that black and other minority victims face. I also just want to mention a couple of other connected things the government can do to support black victims of domestic abuse. And I hope the Minister will maybe be able to pick some of this up and also respond in her reply. First, provide substantial ring-fence funding for specialist services run by and for black women and girls. Second, fund further research into the prevalence and dynamics of violence, abuse and exploitation experienced by black women and girls in collaboration with specialist services supporting them. This should be accompanied by robust data collection on inquiries into domestic abuse and responses collected and published by gender, race, ethnicity, age, ability and other relevant protected characteristics. And finally, ensure that all public services respond appropriately to disclosures of domestic abuse. Safe reporting mechanisms for survivors accessing vital public services must be established, including for victims with no recourse to public funds, so they feel confident disclosing without fear of immigration enforcement. I'll bring my remarks to an end as I'm looking forward to hearing from other colleagues. I want to end by acknowledging the experiences of victims and survivors. Last week, I, along with colleagues, heard from a survivor who experienced domestic abuse from members of their family. They had a 2-year-old children under 3 years old. Despite seeking help, they were turned away by multiple councils and other agencies, each saying it was someone else's problem. Eventually, they were pushed back to their perpetrator. Victims and survivors may only have the energy to seek help once. This is why every agency, including councils, police forces, the NHS and third sector organisations, must have the training skills to adequately support black women from the start. That's all that Valerie's law seeks to do. I hope the government would do the right thing and support it today. Thank you, Sir Roger Gill.
The question is that this House